Young Justice was my introduction to a fair bit of DC characters, with just how expansive the show's roster was. And one of those characters for me was Superboy. Outside of the comic books I read, which were mostly Batman, Nightwing, things of that nature, I never really knew much about the Superman family, and so getting to see Superboy was something brand new for me. And this show completely introduced me to the character. A brash hothead for the most part, especially in the first season, that seems to only want to get things done in his own way, but underneath all of that, he is a conflicted and nuanced character, something I'm really glad the show chose to do with somebody like Superboy, because they could have just easily made him the angry muscle and never moved on from that stereotype. It's a direction that I truly enjoy the character taking, and something I really wanted to cover on this channel. And boy, let me tell you, when Superboy starts out in this show, he is quite angry. But you know something that would probably help Superboy cool off is if you played a nice, relaxing mobile game. Just like the sponsor of today's video, Raid Shadow Legends. Stick around to the end to hear about all the juicy rewards Raid has allowed me to give you all as players. Raid Shadow Legends is a massive MMORPG with nearly an endless amount of content. It's a cross-platform game, meaning you could pick it up on your PC and your phone, with both versions featuring stunning AAA graphics that honestly I'm surprised a mobile game can produce. Not only will you get to experience all of this content, but if you use my link down below, you will not only receive 2 legendary strong heroes, but you can also potentially win up to $5,000 to spend on your Xmas shopping spree of your dream. You could also win gaming consoles, smartphones, and even an $100 Amazon gift card by participating in Raid's Xmas event found at xmas.raidrpg.com, where you'll enter your Raid ID and play the provided game shown on screen and win amazing prizes. I personally enjoy Raid a lot as it is extraordinarily flexible, and since my time as a college student is very limited, I haven't really gotten to play a whole lot of video games recently, so I've been looking towards Raid Shadow Legends to be my way to continue to play games, especially when I'm on campus or even in class, but don't tell my professors. And if all of those potential rewards mentioned earlier weren't enough, you can also use promo code Monkey King in order to receive legendary champion Sun Wukong. I encourage you all to come join me on Raid Shadow Legends, as I do play the game myself, and I do run a clan with the clan tag VENX. So come join me in playing Raid Shadow Legends and enjoy all of the wonderful gifts that they are offering you all for free just for signing up. So come join me and let's smash this Xmas event together. And when you do join me, you will also receive a new player bonus, which will include, on sign up immediately, the epic Grizzled Jarl from the Dwarves faction. He has a magic affinity, he's an epic champion, he's a lot stronger than you'd expect too, and at level 15 and onwards, just to incentivize that you still playing, and as an even further incentive and thank you for continuing to play the game, at level 15 you will get the epic champion Zagarla of the Orcs. She is one of the strongest force affinity support epics that you can get in the game, and so it's a really nice thing to have, especially as you get later into the game and as you keep progressing. Once again, thank you all so much, and thank you to Raid for sponsoring this video, and come join me, let's raid some dungeons, man. And with all of that said, back to your regularly scheduled program. Superboy in the show is one of the founding members of the Young Justice team, somebody who was basically, for all intents and purposes, there from the beginning. He's not a part of the original trio, but he is a founding member of the team, at least in my eyes, as they didn't officially form until after the OG trio found Superboy at Cadmus. And just to catch you all up a little bit to speed, the main trio are frustrated that they are not considered real superheroes and are treated as sidekicks, so they decide to go and help with a Cadmus fire, only for them to discover that Cadmus itself is nothing more than a gigantic cover-up for what is essentially a genetic mutation lab that specializes in making something called a xenomorph. Xenomorphs are genetically modified and completely engineered inside of Cadmus to be workers, laborers, slaves for all intents and purposes, some with the ability of mind control, other with the ability of enhanced strength to help move things around, etc. They are all genetic experiments used as weapons or helpers. Now, xenomorphs are actually highly intelligent creatures and can think for themselves, but are all currently being controlled. But there are also another set of genomorphs, ones that look almost identical to regular people, and some that are even more secret, such as a contingency plan for if Superman were to go off the rails or be completely wiped out from the planet, that being Superboy. A Kryptonian clone that, for all intents and purposes, is supposed to be a mimic of Superman. He, at this point, is really only about a month or two old, but has been aged up to 16 in order to hit a biological wellness point. Really, it's just to keep him in the teen age range, but that's besides the point. That's meta reasoning. Regardless, when Superboy is first conducted and released, he is not exactly very sound of mind. I wouldn't imagine many genetically modified creatures would be, considering the fact that he knows nothing outside of implanted memories and falsehoods. He has essentially been brainwashed and lied to, just like most of the other genomorphs inside of the Cadmus facility. He has never seen the sun, he only has implanted memories of it. And if you can imagine, that's not exactly very cool. It also doesn't help that Superboy himself is naturally prone to being fairly aggressive. The second that he wakes up, he almost immediately attacks the OG trio in an attempt to put them down completely, and he does succeed in doing so quite easily because Superboy is pretty busted in this show. Superboy is pretty much nothing more than a generic Cadmus weapon for the majority of his appearance, very small appearance, in the first episode, which was originally a two-part special that got split up into two separate episodes in every subsequent release of the show. Regardless, Superboy himself is nothing more than a guard dog and essentially is just watching over the Young Justice trio right now and not doing much of anything else. But it's actively through their efforts that they try and convince Superboy that there is a life outside of Cadmus that they could potentially show him. One involving seeing the sun, and something that catches Superboy's ear almost instantly, which is the idea of being able to see Superman. Superboy has been hard-coded genetically to want to replace Superman, so he wants to obviously understand him. It's something he was born with, and considering the fact that he is quite literally a newborn right now, that's kind of the only thing he really wants. And so when they offer that to him, it's very intriguing.
I am the Superboy, a genomorph, a clone made from the DNA of the Superman, created to replace him should he perish, to destroy him should he turn from the light.
He can show you the sun.
Pretty sure it's after midnight. But we can show you the moon.
We can show you, introduce you to Superman.
Superboy genuinely sits and has to think with the idea of what it would be like to not only get out of Cadmus, but to potentially himself get to meet Superman, get to do something outside of what they want him to do. And with Superboy sitting with those ideas and thoughts, he ultimately decides to help the Young Justice trio, and this is where we get to truly meet Superboy proper in all of his crash out antics. God, that word is so gentrified. Superboy has already been shown to not have heat vision, and so already he is off to a perfect start at being a Superman replacement. But even further into the episode, it's revealed that not only does he have severe anger problems, as shown previously, he also is sporting only half of Superman's moveset currently. He can't even fly, something that seems to really bother him.
I'm falling. Superman can fly. Why can't I fly?
Don't know, but it looks like you can leap tall buildings in a single bound. Still cool.
And that's simply because dude is a clone. He is a genomorph. For all intents and purposes, Superboy is never going to be the perfect Superman replacement, but he can be something else. At least something else to the genomorph people. They believe that Superboy could be an ambassador of sorts for them. And that is all set up for us when Duplex reveals that the fire was his doing and that helping break Connor out of his mental conditioning was also his doing, as he wants Connor to be a bastion for genomorph freedom.
What is your choice, brother?
I choose freedom.
But I'll keep it real. Connor does not really care about xenomorph freedom at all, for the most part, or changing a culture and trend setting that. He's still very focused on meeting Superman and at least trying to escape Cadmus. And I really enjoyed the way the show decided to take the relationship between Connor and Kal-El, at least in the early stages of it. When Superboy finally gets out from under the rubble and the team has escaped Cadmus, thankfully, he sees Superman. He looks at him with almost reverence and curiosity. This is a man he has been implanted to want to not only replace, but to be. He wants to be Superman. He wants to understand him. He also wants to be accepted by him. But Superman is completely repulsed by the idea that Cadmus, a corporation that is so evil, could potentially make something as good as Superboy, or just a clone of himself. I mean, how would you feel if there was a clone of you running around? And this causes Superboy to feel defensive. He is already being put in a position in which he can never be what he was designed to be, which is Superman. He can never replace him. And he will most likely never understand what it's like to be Superman either. He doesn't share the same power sets, and Superman clearly doesn't seem to care for him as a person at all, something that seems to deeply bother him. And it's made very clear that Kal-El wants absolutely nothing to do with Superboy.
We'll figure something out for you. The League will, I mean. For now, I'd better make sure they get that blockbuster creature squared away.
And from this moment forward, even though Superboy might not be accepted by Superman and not necessarily accepted by the Justice League at large yet, he is an instrumental force in creating what we will know as Young Justice going forward. He, in my opinion, is part of the original 5 founding members, as I don't believe the Young Justice team was quite complete without McGann, somebody who is completely integral to Superboy's story arc as a character, along with a few others such as Black Canary, and I'll touch on that as they show up, but I think this was a good segue and intro into the character of Superboy and how we got to meet him originally. And so with all of that out of the way, it's time to really get to breaking down Superboy as a character and just getting to geek out about one of my favorite shows. The following episode is the first time that we really get to see Superboy as a character shine in a multi-character dynamic setting, also outside of missions. For the most part, he is reserved and keeps to himself, and typically displays only one real emotion early on in the show, and that's anger. He is almost constantly angry at someone or something, if not, he portrays a sense of cold indifference. Something that is in stark contrast to McGann, who is by nature an empath, considering the fact that she can read people's minds. Something that Superboy doesn't exactly take too kindly to due to his past with the Xenomorphs, who were using that to manipulate him, something that frustrates him mightily. But his reaction to Miss Martian, when she decides to read his mind, is violent and extraordinarily angry. He doesn't really have the empathy to see outside of himself, to see that McGann, for her this is normal, but for him it's a huge invasion of his privacy. But then again, he's like, what, a week old?
Don't worry, Superboy. We'll find you an Earth name too.
Get out of my head!
Superboy continues to be extraordinarily hard on McGann throughout a majority of this episode. He basically wants nothing to do with her, especially knowing that she is a telepath, because to him, that's something that deeply bothers him. I mean, he has trauma surrounding that. So for him to not want her to be in his head makes a whole lot of sense. It also makes sense that he lashes out in the way he does for a few reasons we'll talk about later in the video, but also for the fact that, again, he's like a month old.
Superboy, please?
Don't talk to me.
But something that we also notice is Superboy does genuinely feel bad for the way that he snapped at McGann once he's been given enough time to cool down and think about it. Calder does offer him a few words of encouragement in trying to get him to, be able to apologize to her, considering the concept of apology is probably a little foreign to him, just based off of what he is and who he is as a character, with those implemented memories and all. But he himself is very hard at saying sorry. It's not something that's going to come easy for him. Again, we've really only seen him express the emotions of anger, indifference, and the occasional sad side eye. His entire arc in this episode is really just about him not only being able to accept the fact that he has a telepath on his team now, but also accept the fact that, you know, it's okay to apologize and to also learn how to apologize. This episode does a lot for Connor in trying to help him not only empathize with the characters that are around him, but also trying to get him to express and show more emotions outside of his typical anger. Especially considering he was once again extraordinarily hard on McGann when she messed up during a combat mission. This probably being her very first one ever, he doesn't really hold back in the way in which he speaks to her, and it's very rough. And it really takes McGann having a backbone later in the episode to convince Superboy and the rest of the team to trust her.
All of you.
What did we tell you?
I know, and I know I messed up, but now I'm very clear on what we need to do. Please, trust me.
And by the end of the episode, not only does McGann prove herself to the team, but Superboy is left feeling pretty bad, but also left wanting to spend a little bit more time in McGann's company. And we even get a really sweet scene at the end of the episode, which shows growth for Connor, not major growth, but some, as he learns to apologize.
Sorry.
The following episode doesn't do a whole lot for Connor's character, but it helps to establish his early relationship with McGann and how he's somewhat dealing with it. He didn't exactly get off to the greatest start with her, but it's so very obvious McGann has a crush on him to just about anybody except Superboy and Wally, because Wally is Wally. Other than that, I mean, the two characters just get a few nice moments together, and they actually start to be cordial with one another. It's really the beginning of their talking stage, if you will.
Don't you want to lead?
You?
After the Mr. Twister fiasco?
You did all right.
Also, I don't know where else to put this in my script, but Nolan North voices Superboy, and I didn't know that. And I watched this show when it released in 2011, and I watched it through Cartoon Network, and never did it once click for me that Nolan North was the voice actor, and now I physically cannot unhear Nolan North's voice from Superboy, and it's kind of annoying me. But since I know that, I figured I'm gonna make you guys suffer too, in case you didn't know that. Now, this upcoming episode is really Superboy heavy. The beginning of the episode is all about Superboy and really his events to try and not only be a hero, but live up to the heroic reputation of Superman. But unfortunately for him, his brash style of saviorism isn't exactly conducive to saving the most amount of lives, and Superman calls him out on this. Also because Superman finds himself to be very frustrated with not only Superboy's antics, but just with the fact that Superboy exists in general. And it's very much reflected in the way in which he interacts with Superboy.
I had that. I didn't want to take the chance. As it is, your landing could have destabilized the entire bridge. It didn't, but it could have. We don't yet know the limits of your powers. Well, maybe you could, help me figure that out.
To Superboy, Superman is almost like this mythological absentee father figure that he quite literally never gets to spend any real time with, nor does he get any time of day from his father figure, something that seems to bother Connor a lot. And obviously we can see this from Superman's perspective. Can't really imagine you would want to hang out with your cloned son very much either, especially because the Justice League seem to know who Cadmus is being run by. But we see that Superboy is fairly jealous because just about every other member of the Young Justice Squad gets to have a mentor for them, and he doesn't have one at all. It makes him almost completely reject the notion of getting a mentor or getting training in general, because the idea that he can't have his own exclusively, I believe, is super harmful to the way in which he feels about it. So when Black Canary tries to show him how to do combat techniques, Connor is extraordinarily avoidant of it. He just gets angry and defensive, especially when he loses, because obviously this is Black Canary. She's gone up against people stronger than him probably all the time.
That's it. I'm done.
Training is mandatory.
Black Canary thankfully doesn't take it too harshly. She recognizes that Superboy is hurting in some way and simply just offers to be there for him. Something that he hasn't really been offered by any other member of the League, really.
When you're ready, I'll be here.
This episode does a lot to show us Superboy's brash and oftentimes angry nature. He's almost constantly frustrated by the fact that he feels as though he is lesser compared to Superman, and that Superman won't give him the time of day. He takes it out a lot of the time, not only on the people that surround him, but also the villains. And Superboy is oftentimes, especially early in the season, prone to going off on his own and bottling up his feelings and trying to deal with it all himself, not necessarily knowing how to reach out to others. Which leads to Superboy being separated from the rest of the group when parts of Amazo are being stolen by his creator in order to reform the robot that could literally destroy the Justice League. But I want to divert a little second real quick because the show itself does, to a conversation between Bruce and Superman. We are quite clearly shown that Clark is very adverse to Superboy, even in conversation with other Justice League members, and he expresses his fears and worries around Superboy in general. And I mean, you know, it's a kind of weird conversation when Batman is the one who's most calm and Superman's actually getting angry and upset. The entire idea of Superboy as a concept deeply affects him, and it's not something that he is ready to deal with personally yet, which is going to end up leaving Connor in a lesser emotional state and stunting Connor's growth, because unfortunately it is kind of directly tied to being able to get Superman's praise, at least early on in this show. And because of these feelings of inadequacy, he'll often run off on his own to try and solve issues, which leads to him getting his ass kicked 9 out of 10 times. Ultimately, and thankfully for everybody, the Young Justice group is able to defeat Amazo and re-separate him into his different parts, but at the same time, Connor himself has definitely cooled off significantly by the end of the episode, and is once again kind of looking for praise from his father figure.
The job. Your ability to handle them has impressed the League.
The whole League?
Given time, yes. Kryptonians, as you know, have very hard heads.
And despite not getting that praise necessarily, he is far more open to Black Canary's previous offer.
I'm ready.
Good, because I'm here.
Connor has honestly come to a lot more of a level-headed mental space, at least from episode 5 onwards. It's not over the top like he's just a chill dude now, chill guy, but he's pretty much fairly regulated, and we see that in the episode Downtime, an episode that I love because I love the idea and concept of seeing superheroes when they're living their regular, normal, everyday lives. In this episode, we get to see that Connor is just hanging out with McGann, getting to spend time with somebody who not only cares about him, but also understands and accepts who he is. And as well, the two of them are, you know, still in a talking stage, doing all that fun little stuff. And outside of that, he's just enjoying living life and being free, even if it means getting absolutely drenched in McGann's cooking ingredients, because she doesn't understand the fact that other people do not have the ability to just catch everything she throws at them. And just to show how far Connor as a character has come, we end up getting a mind wipe episode. The entire plot of this episode is that everybody's favorite mental Simon has pretty much mind wiped the entire team, taking them to about 6 months previous to where they've been at. So this is even before the Independence Day, June or July. They're really taking them way back to March, which for Superboy does nothing more than regress him completely into the animalistic state he was left in when he first entered or exited, the pod. It is essentially a complete reset of Connor, and all we see is a complete destruction machine, somebody devoid of really any sort of rational thinking. Something that Superboy has actually been really improving on, especially comparatively to episode 1. We've seen him do a lot more rational thinking throughout these last 8 episodes. He's done a lot better at that. So this episode really serves to highlight and show just how far he has come as a character relative to when we were starting with him. And of course, there's only one way to beat amnesia via telepathy, and that's to remember via telepathy. And thankfully, Connor has the best friend for that. It's through McGann's mind space that Connor is able to once again find himself and to find a little bit of that peace he was starting to find with the team and with the family that he was building. It also helps McGann because she was really losing that telepathy battle, but it is her care for Connor that pushes her through the forefront and pushes her through to being able to take down Simon.
sorry. I should have paid more attention. It was too much at once. Too much at once. Hello, Megan. That's so me.
Kick his butt.
It's a really sweet moment between the two characters that can really just be used to encapsulate their relationship, because that's majority of the clips that were shown between the two. But regardless, Connor is constantly there trying to help her. It's so obviously clear that he cares for her on a deep level, and that's a lot of character growth, especially from the first episode that they spent together, in which Connor was really an asshole to her. It's just a really sweet episode to help establish their close relationship as more of a situationship for right now, because they're so close to dating. And outside of that, it's kind of it for this episode. The next episode is more or less Connor and McGann having the B plot, and it pretty much just involves them going to school for the very first time. Again, this show starts in like the summer and kind of just takes place throughout the rest of the school year. And since Connor and McGann are not technically humans, they both have to come up with human names and end up going to school, because the Justice League believe in an education for the test tube babies too. Which means that Superboy, for the first time in the show, has to pick an actual name. And McGann, of course, suggests his name to be Connor. And his last name is also suggested to be Kent by Martian Manhunter, which they didn't know at the time was Superman's last name. At least Superboy didn't. Otherwise, he probably would not have taken that last name. But it's important to know that he did take the name Connor Kent.
Connor's always been my favorite name.
A last name will also be required.
Perhaps Kent.
Oh, in memory of Dr. Fate, the late Kent Nelson.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could imagine Connor trying to actively be a regular person at his high school, it doesn't exactly go to plan. Dude pretty much shows up on campus and accidentally almost gets into a fight with the school's resident jock, who's also wearing a Superman shirt. Something that kind of pisses Connor off, because we know his complicated relationship with that guy.
Shirt's fine. Everyone's shirt is fine.
Someone's fine.
I also like the little bit of world building that superheroes are so revered in this show that a majority of people in high school wear the superhero gear. It's also worth noting that this episode goes to show that Connor is far more than just a regular meathead. They did a pretty good job of educating him back at Cadmus's lab, and that's shown throughout this episode.
Anyone else?
Modern Malaysia was created in 1855 and ruled by the Bokun dynasty until it was divided by the great powers into North and South Malaysia after World War II.
Nothing else of real and honest note happens in this episode, outside of just slowly edging us to potentially a relationship between Connor and McGann. I mean, what a slow burn, man. Also, this episode serves as McGann's like, oh my god, I'm in high school moment. Like, that's really dope, but that's more of her episode and video that I plan. Connor's just kind of along for the ride. And the last episode wasn't super important, this one actually is. This entire episode's premise is that the team has to go undercover as the Terror Twins to hopefully infiltrate Bel Rev and to figure out why exactly the prison is being run the way it is, because apparently there's going to be a supposed breakout, which means sending both Connor and McGann undercover as the Terror Twins because they look the most similar. This episode does a lot for establishing Connor and some more of his mannerisms, specifically when it comes to McGann and the way in which he would do just about anything for her. And this episode also serves to introduce us to one of my favorite side characters, Icicle Jr., and his friendship with Connor himself. As well, this episode shows a lot of Connor's insecurity when it comes to being inferior to Superman.
But your strength is...
Not at Superman's level. I get it.
No, that's not what I was...
Whatever.
Well, we've known pretty much since the start of this show that Connor feels inferior to Superman, and it's a topic they have tried their best to explore by mostly giving Connor the B-plot. This is the very first episode where Connor truly has the A-plot in regards to his feelings for Superman. Now, while his feelings for Superman aren't the central plot, it's actually part of the reason he was able to get so close to Icicle Jr. in the first place, because they both have a shared problematic history with their father figures in turn. Both of their father figures pretty much want nothing to do with them, and so that actually allows Icicle Jr. and Superboy to bond. It's something we see a lot throughout that entire episode, and something I really enjoyed seeing. I liked seeing the therapy session between both the Terror Twins and Hugo Strange, as it serves for McGann to help and try to deconstruct Superboy's feelings about Superman, even if he lashes out at the mere thought of doing so.
It makes Tommy feel unworthy of...
Or maybe Tommy refuses to live in Tuppence' stupid fantasy world where every problem's solved in half an hour.
It's also the episode in which we see Connor start to break away from the notion of needing Superman to approve of him, basically. It's really in this episode that we start to see him break away from that, all because Icicle Jr. said one simple phrase.
But I try not to live or die over getting his approval, you know? So, tell me about your sister.
I would argue Icicle Jr. was closer to being helpful for Superboy than really any experience he had on the team outside of McGann for the most part. Connor's conversations with Icicle Jr. set to reframe how he looks at his relationship with Superman and how he looks at his need of approval of Superman. It's really interesting considering Icicle Jr. is supposed to be the bad guy, but through a majority of the episode we see the two characters continue to grow closer, to the point that Superboy uses this connection to not only manipulate Icicle Jr. into helping him get to McGann and essentially stop the prison riot, but also to help him further his own personal life. It's really nice to see, honestly. It also serves to demonstrate that Connor is a lot more than just brawn, because he's able to manipulate and use emotional tactics against his enemies when it suits him best. He just so happens to like to hit first and ask questions later for the most part. But when he needs to turn it on, he can turn it on.
Don't you get it? You heard Freeze in the mess. This is his power play. He's taking what belongs to your paw. Traitor!
And of course, this episode also serves one final truly important thing for Connor, and also for McGann. This is the episode where Connor officially gets with Miss Martian. It's really a nice culmination because we're like halfway through the season at this point, and they've been building towards this relationship since like episode 2. It was really nice, it felt really fulfilling, and it was a decent slow burn romantic relationship to where we're at. Icicle Jr.'s reaction is also just like top tier. The dude was pure comedy throughout the entire episode, and despite being such a minor character, he really did steal the show. So shout out to Icicle Jr., one of the best side characters ever.
Is she? And are you? Oh, Dad's gonna kill me.
And while we might have just hit a retrospectively very high point for Connor and the team as a whole, we're about to hit a fairly low point. It is when Connor and the rest of the team are kind of just hanging out and chopping it up inside of Mount Justice that Connor overhears a conversation between Aqualad and Batman, denoting that there is the potential of being a mole in the group, with Connor, McGann, and Artemis being the top suspects of being the mole. Specifically, Connor finds this to be extremely hurtful, because not only A, does his leader keep this from him, but also B, like, Connor has done a lot to make himself not only better as a person, but also to better himself in the ideals of being a superhero. So to be accused of potentially being a mole to him is extremely harmful and hurtful to his character, which makes sense. So when they go on their next mission, let's just say it does not end well, and Connor tries to play overprotective boyfriend of McGann. Again, doesn't end well.
Come on, I'll keep you safe.
You're my boyfriend, Connor, not my keeper. Stop behaving like a character from a 70s sitcom.
I just want to protect you.
Like Aqualad protected us? I'm not sure your protection or your patronizing is good for our health.
This episode for Connor serves as a slight deconstruction to masculinity and the idea that he has to protect his woman when it comes to being a superhero. Basically, Connor, since he's been in a relationship with McGann, and this has been building over the last few episodes, has not really treated her as though she is a capable member of the team like he used to, but instead treating her as though he is his girlfriend, and that McGann can't protect herself at all. Something that Connor has been struggling to deal with throughout a majority of the last few episodes, basically from 11 to 14, which is where we're at right now. And it's something that this episode wanted to help deconstruct because it's been proven time and time again that McGann is more than capable of taking care of herself. Either that or I'm simply just reading into it way too much, but that's the way in which I view this, considering Connor spends a majority of the episode by himself fighting wolves. But that's kind of the whole premise and idea behind this episode. Outside of establishing that there might be a mole on the team, and establishing that the team has to come back together after almost breaking apart due to this revelation, Connor also has to realize that his girlfriend is more than capable of taking care of herself and being independently functional without him, and that she doesn't need him but wants him. And I think that's something important for Connor to learn, and important for the audience of young kids to learn. Although that subtext was 100% lost in me when I was a child, but I wasn't exactly the smartest kid in the world, so there's that too. Overall, for Connor and McGann, it was a sweet episode between the two of them, and for the team, well, they haven't broken up yet, so that's good, I guess. Oh, and Connor manages to pick up another stray. This makes 2 out of 3 by this point, I believe.
Aren't you?
Again, I'm sorry. I was just worried.
And that's sweet, Connor, but on a mission, I'm your teammate, not your girlfriend. Agreed?
Yeah.
And while this episode was mostly grounded in reality and decently sweet, even if it did almost involve the team breaking up, the next episode is not sweet in the slightest. And it's also one of my favorite episodes of this first season. And of course, I'm talking about the episode Failsafe, in which the entire Justice League gets obliterated off the face of the earth in a mock training exercise, because, spoiler alert, none of this is real. The League didn't actually get wiped out, and an alien species isn't actually coming to destroy the world. This is essentially just a training exercise done mentally through John Jones, aka Martian Manhunter, in order to teach the team about failure. They're never supposed to win. My apologies, I'm a little under the weather. They're never supposed to win this objective. This is supposed to be a lesson in failure. They're all supposed to die. Now, they all know this going into it. It's why almost none of the team is distraught at the idea that the Justice League and a majority of their mentors and friends and family are probably either dead or severely injured. It really doesn't seem to bother most people on the team. And it doesn't really bother Connor at all, outside of the subtext that he is the only Superman left. Connor is the Superman now. He gets to understand the one thing he's wanted to know for a majority of his life, which is he capable of being Superman? But none of that really matters right now, as it's just an exercise, and he doesn't really think that way. I mean, even when he loses Wolf, it doesn't really affect him, as though you might think it would, considering how close he is to Wolf.
Wolf! There was no indication of feedback. I'm sorry.
Can't do anything for him now.
It isn't until the unfortunate and accidental death of Artemis that this training exercise becomes real to not only the entire team, but more importantly to McGann. More on that later. But basically, Artemis's death makes the entire team fully believe that this is real and all of this devastation is truly happening. And while the team mourns and grieves in their own way, Superboy himself doesn't really seem all too broken up about it. As a matter of fact, he seems pretty level-headed, something that is quite the opposite of his usual demeanor. And this is truly where that idea that I mentioned earlier of Connor being the only Superman on the planet left truly comes into play.
I'm not Superman.
I don't know who you are, son. And right now, I don't care. You wear the S and you got the job done.
I'm not Superman.
Tell that to the enemy.
And for the rest of this episode, Connor truly and honestly tries to live up to the ideals of being like the Man of Steel, of being Superman. He was programmed from the very start to act as though he is Superman. So that idea that he can finally be that, it's amazing for him. It's something we see a lot in this episode. And at the mere thought that Superman might be alive and not even dead, Connor seems to freak out a little bit.
You and Superman! And everyone!
I Jones is revealed to be alive, and of course that sparks the idea that this is a teleporter and not necessarily a death beam is what the aliens are doing. They're just holding the superheroes, not killing them. Connor almost seems distressed at this notion and idea. He seems to almost dislike the fact that he is no longer the sole Superman, that he is no longer the sole hero. And it's really something subtle that I didn't really pick up on as a kid, at least until further rewatches when I got older. I started to realize this is all Connor has ever wanted. And even in his description to McGann, when he says he's going to be put up as bait to basically potentially die, it's what Superman would have done. It's everything he's been programmed to want to do, to want to be.
It's okay, McGann. It's what Superman would do.
And while Connor had spent a decent amount of time throughout this show separating himself from Superman, carving his own path, and getting to make meaningful relationships outside of just his want to be Superman, and just starting to live his own natural life, when that opportunity presented itself, he couldn't have been happier. Connor was happy during this event. Up until he died, he was fairly level-headed and happy. It was everything he had ever really wanted. And so when he finds out it was nothing more than a training exercise gone wrong, because McGann's mental telepathy was able to take advantage of John Jones's and make the scenarios real post-Artemis's death, Connor was left feeling miserable. And that ties in directly to the next episode, which is all about these heroes going to therapy and dealing with probably what is the most traumatic experience of their life, if not probably second, considering we got people like Dick Grayson's Robin here. Connor spends a lot of the following episode in which most of the characters are getting therapy and talking through their issues, avoiding the entire concept. He doesn't want to talk about it at all. As a matter of fact, he seems fairly angry. Some people can interpret this as him feeling miserable about the scenario that happened, but the reason he's like this is because he feels guilty, and he doesn't want to talk about it at all.
Vulnerability. You don't know what I feel.
Connor!
Just leave me alone!
And so instead of addressing the potential feelings of guilt and honestly sadness at the idea that while all of his friends and people around him were suffering and sad and upset, he was extremely happy and content with his life, instead of dealing with any of that, Superboy decides to go on a mission that involves his friends, I guess, his strays. It's kind of a sweet episode and something that pisses off the rest of the league because they're all not supposed to go out on any missions. This entire episode, at least in its A-plot, serves to set up the gods of New Genesis as well as set up concepts such as Darkseid, Darkseid's underlings, and things of that nature. Basically, one of Connor's strays that he picked up, being Sphere, is nothing more than a piece of New Genesis technology. I'm sorry, we see it as nothing more than a piece of New Genesis technology. To them, Sphere is a live and a living being, someone that they want to take care of. And of course, the whole reason they're actually there is because a lot of the tech from these new gods, and of course from Darkseid, is being sold on the black market, and they want to destroy this technology and bring it back to them. This whole A-plot just really sets up a lot more ideas, but doesn't do a whole lot for Connor as a character, outside of showing him another team that works together and cares about one another. But it is also worth noting that it shows to set up the fact that Connor feels a kinship with these essentially stray characters that were once used as experiments or just tools of weapon and warfare, much like himself. Connor sees the intrinsic value in Wolf. He sees the intrinsic value in Sphere. To him, these things are not merely objects, but extensions of the things that he cares about in his own life. And so when the New Genesis gods think about taking away the Sphere, bringing it back, because, quote, we only see it as a piece of technology, Connor refuses to let it go, because to him it is something more. They bonded.
To you, she's merely technology.
No, it's not like that! Then what is it like? We bonded, okay?
And it's through this experience not only opening up to the New Genesis gods, but having to deal with the idea of potentially losing Sphere, that Connor was finally ready to talk about his experiences during the training session.
Here's the ugly truth. I wasn't devastated. Even with Superman, Tornado, you, the whole league dead.
Even though I didn't save Wolf, I watched Artemis and Kaldor die, and abandon McGann, I felt at peace.
Connor was happy. He was at peace. It was everything he was designed to be as. He was Superman. It was everything he'd ever wanted, at least told to want. And so Connor felt good. He felt great, actually. And that just doesn't sit right with him, because the rest of the team was absolutely miserable. They were sad. They were mourning the loss of each other, but he wasn't. He didn't even care. He was just happy to finally be what he always wanted to be. And I think the idea that that sits poorly with him is a really great reflection of Connor as a character, as he is now, comparatively to how he was just a few episodes ago at the start, let's say about 10, where I guarantee you episodes 2 or 3, he probably would have been completely fine, and I doubt he would have felt a whole lot of guilt towards the situation. But by this point in the show, he has experienced a lot of life outside of the pods and outside of his programmed conditioning. He has made friends. He has, in reality, made family with the people around him. He has a girlfriend. He has people he truly cares about. He has Sphere. He has Wolf. It's just a whole lot of things for him. And so Connor isn't really wanting to just be Superman anymore. We've slowly seen him move away from the idealization of Superman and the idea of being the perfect Superman. My whole point in saying this is Connor has done a lot of growth as a character, even if it doesn't seem like a whole lot, because sometimes they do really just default to angry man hits thing a little too often. But Connor himself, at least to me, has felt like he has grown a lot from that first appearance of his. And with all that deep talk about Connor, it's time to segue to something just a little bit lighter and what is played for laughs in this show. I love that the start of this episode implies that Connor really has a thing for Black Canary, because this whole scenario is absolutely insane. It serves more as a lesson for McGann than anything else, but dude must really have a thing for Black Canary. Outside of this somewhat gag, because it's not really necessarily played for laughs, I just found it a little bit funny. This entire episode is nothing more than Connor essentially finding out where his name comes from, and also finding out a little bit more about McGann herself. That's really the whole thing that I got on Connor's end anyways out of this episode, because there's not a whole lot necessarily to get for anything else. McGann basically gets to meet the person she bases her entire personality off of in this episode. And while that's a huge thing for her and something I really am excited to cover in her episode of the show, Connor doesn't really get a whole lot of what this means to her at all, but he also doesn't really get much of anything out of this episode except for like 2 major things. Firstly, the dude finds out his name is based off of the boyfriend of Megan in Hello Megan, who also Megan bases a majority of not only her personality on, but looks as well. Something that should be completely earth-shattering to the dude, considering he found out his girlfriend named him Connor with the intent of getting with him. But, you know, Connor's just chilling, I guess. He's just a chill guy for real.
Connor! I thought you'd never get here.
I mean, it's even down to the voice. They were laying it on thick, man. Kind of funny, though. Regardless, for Connor, this leaves him with a few questions regarding who McGann is exactly. Like, who are you when you're not being what you're portraying, essentially? And when he does end up finding out, at least he knew McGann was a white Martian. He's known for a majority of the show. Like, that's not really a secret. He's known because they share a mind space. Connor makes it very clear to her that this is a lot more than just surface level looks for him, and that he cares about McGann as a person. He says that she doesn't have to do this for him, but it's honestly more of McGann doing it for herself. More stuff to cover in her video. Man, this next episode is really big for Connor. Not only helping him understand who he is as a person, but understand a lot of things. Connor himself has kind of just been chilling at Mount Justice, enjoying his day, until he is called by a high frequency that pretty much only he and like Superman can hear. And it's by everybody's favorite bald entrepreneur and sometimes president, best voiced by Clancy Brown, aka Mr. Krabs, Lex Luthor. Now, Luthor comes to Superboy basically to tell him about another Superman clone, this one being Match. Now, Superboy was of course skeptical because he knows Lex Luthor's reputation, but he was at least willing to listen and to try and figure out what's going on with another clone of himself. The idea that another version of himself is being completely left alone, yes, we see the fit Superboy, is being completely left alone and abandoned much like he was, doesn't sit well with him at all. And Luthor knew this would be the case. So of course he goes to go see the genomes and to figure out, you know, what is going on and why is there another version of him stuck and trapped. And of course our boy the GOAT, Duplex, I don't know, I hope I'm saying his name right. Regardless, he's the one who's going to guide Superboy into finding the other clone of himself. And when we do, it's honestly a little bit of a nice parallel to how Superboy was found originally by the team. When Superboy finds Match, he is once again frozen in a test tube, but also completely and utterly insane. Much like Superboy, the dude woke up and was ready to throw hands off rip, but unlike Superboy, he features a full host of Kryptonian abilities, down to flight, freeze breath, heat vision, and whatever bullshit Superman gets for this week of powers.
You can fly. Why can you fly?
You see, Match is not only a version of a Superman clone, but one that actually has all of his powers, and one that absolutely trounces on Superboy just due to the fact that he has more raw strength. Superboy is honestly one of the weaker Kryptonians. Again, another idea that was really unique to the show in its entirety, because Superboy is technically one of the strongest, especially, you know, because he shattered the universe. But also what we see with Match is that the dude is genuinely crazy. He can't seemingly hold up to any semblance of regular thought. And while Superboy himself might have gotten healed and fixed up, he has to learn a really terrible truth, and that's he's not fully Kryptonian. As a matter of fact, he is part human, and to make everything worse, that part human is Lex Luthor.
The gaps in the sequences were bridged with human DNA, robbing you of your full Kryptonian powers. No flight, no heat vision, etc.
I'm part human.
And so Lex Luthor offers Superboy a way to make himself whole once again. They call them shields. I don't know why I thought they were patches as a kid, like, you know, that Venom type stuff in Batman Beyond, which they kind of are like that, but not necessarily. Basically, these patches will suppress the human genome in his DNA, which, mind you, the human part of Superboy's DNA is the only thing keeping him sane and functional, because with full Kryptonian, Match is genuinely driven to insanity and doesn't have any regulation over his emotions or really any logical thought. It's just destruction. Being part human is what keeps Superboy normal and regulated. So if you can imagine what suppressing that portion of his body will do to him, it's not great. But we're also introduced to something called Genome City, a place where all genomes can live properly and happily together, away from the prying eyes of the public and the scrutinization that would come with those beings existing, considering, man, we hate each other for race. Could you imagine trying to get people to enjoy genomes? But that's besides the point. The entire premise of this episode is Superboy figuring out that he is not fully Kryptonian, he's part human, and the ramifications that comes with considering he still kind of wants to be like Superman, and the patches allow him to do so. But unfortunately, the patches come with a disbenefit, which is it makes him highly aggressive and angry, more angry and aggressive than usual. He doesn't really have emotional regulation when he's suppressing that human portion of his DNA. And Lex Luthor did all of this just to figure out that Genome City existed. Luthor always has a secondary backup plan, but also to put Connor into his back pocket, because he is selling Connor on the idea that these patches will give him the ability to be like Superman, the person he so wants to desperately be like. Luthor also gets to play into the idea that Superboy doesn't have a father figure and that Luthor could be the father figure for Superboy, considering Superman refuses to fill that void, and I guarantee you Lex Luthor knows that.
Face it, son. You have much more in common with me than Superman.
That's a lie!
What has he given you? Nothing. Not even affection. And why? Because Big Boy Blue lives in a world of black and white.
And while Superboy doesn't necessarily buy into what Lex Luthor is selling initially, he does ultimately end up deciding to keep the patches. Because again, it's the fantasy that he could be like Superman. It's the reason he tries to keep them, because he believes it will make him a better hero. Even though he does just think about doing what he really should be doing, which is throwing them away. I don't ever believe that the patches were necessarily physically addictive, but I also believe that they were much more of a mentally addictive thing. And why do I say this? Because patches are treated in this show as though it is an addiction for Superboy. I mean, that's what we spend the next few episodes watching him do when he does use these patches. He's almost always using them to help try and better himself as a hero, even if it's at the detriment potentially to the people around him. We see that when he uses these patches specifically on missions, while it does help enhance their ability to sometimes do better on the missions, it almost always ends up being a hindrance in the long run. For example, when he's on the patches, he cares very little about his team's well-being. He doesn't even care about Miss Martian and would rather go fly off and try to fight the next big villain rather than take care of his girlfriend, who is quite literally dying due to the heat. It's something he doesn't even think about. And this entire episode that I'm talking about right now deals with the idea of Parasite, and Parasite gets more powerful based on the power of the people he's fighting. And even though Superboy knows he is being drained by Parasite, and that Parasite is taking his powers, he keeps using the patches, despite the fact that this is most likely putting his team in more danger by making Parasite more powerful. It's something he doesn't even bother to really think about, because to him, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that he can potentially be a better hero using the patches.
You're drained! Parasite took more power than you even have. Heat vision?
I have the genetic potential for it. Must have been enough for him.
He lies to those closest to him to keep the patches hidden and to keep them a secret, because he knows what they would say if anybody figured out A, where they come from, and B, what they do. He knows what they would say. But it doesn't really matter to him, because again, while not physically addictive, it is mentally addictive. How many times am I going to talk about addiction on this channel this month? Jeez. And this idea persists until almost the end of this first season, basically. The idea that he is using these patches to help further himself is at least what he thinks. As a matter of fact, he almost gets one of his teammates killed. During an ambush of the team, Superboy decides to use his final patch in the hopes that he will be able to help the team get out of the nasty situation that they're in, but in return, he almost genuinely gets one of his teammates killed in the process because he doesn't have full control of his heat vision, and as well, again, the patches just make him more unstable and more angry, something Lex Luthor probably wanted. And it takes being confronted with this reality for Superboy to finally put down the patches. That and the fact that dude's completely out of them by this episode and would need to re-up with Lex Luthor.
Intel that there was a traitor on the team.
Namely Artemis McGann or me.
It is more complicated than that. But your recent behavior does concern me. Your attack on Mammoth nearly got Artemis killed.
Which, for all intents and purposes, is something Superboy almost considers doing. As a matter of fact, he does end up going to Santa Prisca, in which he is being asked to go. And we are shown that the three mole suspects, him, Artemis, and Miss Martian, are all technically under the thumb right now of different facets of bad guys. Each will get their own episode explaining why and how they got there, but for right now, Superboy is under the thumb of Lex Luthor, or at least that is how it appears. Because in reality, Superboy had actually admitted to not only being a user of these patches, but also to being under Lex Luthor's thumb to the team by and large, because he believes, as of course Black Canary had once told him, the truth is the best option, and it will make him feel better. He took that lesson to heart and applies it in this situation.
The other half was human. That's why I don't have, will never have, full Kryptonian powers.
You sure? Because you sure...
It is also completely worth noting that McGann reveals herself to be a white Martian to the rest of the team, and Superboy pretty much says that he's known. If you go back to Season 1, Episode 9, when Superboy's memories are being restored by McGann, there's a slight flash of her being shown as a white Martian. Superboy is known for a long time, but didn't want to out her and instead waited for her to be comfortable enough to say something. Honestly, a really beautiful moment, but I believe it deserves more attention in McGann's video than Superboy's. But again, a display of his emotional intelligence. Regardless, the episode culminates in the idea that none of the people on the team, at least those three, were ever truly a mole. The idea that there was potentially never a mole is toyed with, and as well, the team is closer than ever. Superboy no longer needs patches and honestly has become really content with himself and his ability to just not have to be exactly like Superman, but to still be a hero. Oh, and remember how I said there might not be a mole? Yeah, I lied, of course. I think if you're watching this video, you've probably seen the show before. Red Arrow is the mole, and he just got the entire Justice League under Vandal Savage's control for 24 hours. And that leads us to the season finale. The final episode isn't something super duper major for Superboy, as it has to wrap up a ton of plots for about the entire team, plus deal with 2 brand new members in Zatanna and Rocket. So it's just not like they couldn't spend a whole ton of time on Superboy, but what they do give us is perfectly fine, which is a majority of his arc was already done by this point. So really there was only one thing left to address, and that's the fact that Superman still was not giving him his flowers at all. The entire reason this team even started in the very first place was because a lot of these sidekicks wanted to get out of the shadow of their mentors. They wanted to make names for themselves as superheroes outside of whatever their mentor was giving them. And for Superboy, I think this is very poignant to his character. He very much wants to get out of the shadow of Superman, but also to stand next to him at the same time. Because to Superboy, the idea of being Superman, while not what it once was, is still appealing to him as being closer to Superman and less of wanting to be him. Superboy has become comfortable in his own skin and finding out who he is as a person. He has cultivated a group of people that truly care for him as well. And so the final fight in this show, the really big fight, I think is really awesome that it's between both Robin and Superboy against Superman and Batman. I think it is highly, highly important that Superboy and Robin, who are both dealing with similar issues in regards to being their mentor-mentee relationship, get to fight alongside each other and to help each other out. It's a nice bit of symbolism, as well as Superboy kind of getting the catharsis of beating the crap out of Superman for all of the BS Superman put him through. It's honestly a really nice action sequence and a really nice way to end the episode. And it also all comes full circle because Superman is only ending up defeated because he is fully Kryptonian and fully weak to kryptonite, whereas Superboy takes less damage from the kryptonite due to not being fully Kryptonian. It's a nice little, thing that's there. And in the end, not only does Superboy get his girl, but he also gets the respect and admiration of Superman. And even more importantly, he is officially accepted as Connor Kent, as somebody who is a part of Superman's family. He has truly gotten the mentor he so deserved.
You did good work. Thanks. So, I heard you took a name. Yeah, Connor Kent. My secret identity is Clark Kent. I didn't know. I wasn't trying to... No, the thing is, I'm glad. Connor Kent. It seems right.
Overall, I really truly enjoyed Connor's arc throughout this first season of the show. I really just enjoyed getting to watch him in general. He wasn't just the angry stereotype that I honestly remembered him as being. He did a lot of growing throughout this first season, something that was really nice for me to watch. Wally was fairly more stagnant as a character. While learning a few lessons here and there, I felt like Superboy grew a lot from his first appearance to the last appearance. And again, it felt slow and incremental. Something that Greg Weisman was so very good at doing was growing these characters slowly and not just having them make huge leaps in character changes within an episode to an episode, because that's not how real life works. Overall, it's just been really enjoyable to go back and watch Young Justice again. It's not something I necessarily got to watch a whole lot these last few years because I've been busy with other things in YouTube, and I remember watching this show a lot in middle school. So it's really nice to go back and watch, and to also see that it's really just as good as I remember it being. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you guys for watching, and once again to thank Raid Shadow Legends, the sponsor of this video. Use the QR code on screen or the link down below in the description to join the game, and don't forget to use Monkey King for extra rewards and 2 legendary heroes. Once again, thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like, it helps out the channel a lot. If you disliked the video, leave a dislike and then tell me down below why you disliked the video. Constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you. If you want to sub, it's free. You can always unsubscribe later, and I would truly appreciate it. If you want to support me on Patreon, I have one that is linked down below in the description. It's more or less just a way for you to support me as a creator, as well as be a part of my community where I run a Discord in which you can message me and everybody else who's kind of just a part of the community. As well, each one of my videos is posted completely unedited and early, so no more freeze frames and things of that nature. As well, finally, I do have a $5 and above tier in which the audience gets shouted out at the end of each and every one of my videos, so it's about time to do that. So shout out eSibert13, shout out Gabriel LaFonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.